and welcome fellow bookworms and film fans. Welcome to this week's book to film adaptation where we will be looking at The Picture of Dorian Gray, written by Oscar Wilde in my very lovely cloth-bound classic edition, as I'm sure you can see in the shelf behind me. So it was published in 1890. It's been adapted to screen several times over the years, but I'll be looking at the 2009 version. Now, we'll be looking at three things as usual: how good is the film, how good is the book, and how well does the film take from the book. Please bear in mind there will be spoilers as well. So the film. Now, this film is not everyone's favourite. In fact, I don't think it was too well received when it first came out. I don't think it's too well received now. Michael really doesn't like the film, so he wouldn't rewatch it with me, which is fine. But I really enjoy it. Like, it's such like a guilty pleasure for me. Like, I actually do enjoy it. And to be fair, sometimes they do muffle the voices, they do over talk each other. There is confusion as well, sort of like with what's going on. And you know, it did annoy me slightly at times when it's like they'd be talking, but they'd be like, and you're like, I'm sorry, like I know you're supposed to show confusion, but I'm not actually supposed to be confused. I think you've forgotten what you're supposed to be doing with this film. But I love as well at the beginning how you had the two characters with Dorian. So you had one almost like the angel on his shoulder. The angel's always on the right shoulder and the devil's always on the left, which is why left-handed people are the children of the devil. Hi! I wasn't aware the devil was my father, but there we go. And I love that you had this sort of the angel Basil and the devil Harry, and they're both kind of fighting almost for his soul, is what I kind of interpreted to be in the film and in the book. But I loved how you saw that in the film, how he first got to know Basil, and then through Basil he got to know Harry, and then you see them kind of fighting over over Dorian's time and attentions. The look of the slow descent into evil as well is done brilliantly. You see on the canvas, because everyone knows, obviously, I mean, I'd love to have a portrait painted of me that ages and does everything, and I still look absolutely perfect. I'd probably make myself a little bit slimmer, maybe a little bit less round cheeks, but other than that, everybody, most people don't really want to age. And I love how it's shown in the film, how he's sort of slowly realising that actually this is like, whatever happens is not going to affect him. And he slowly realises that he can do anything that he wants, does Dorian. And you see this slow descent into evil. I must admit, at the very end, when he's kind of fighting his portrait and he kills the portrait, it is a little bit too CGI-ish. They probably could have done it a bit better, but what do you expect, to be perfectly honest? But honestly, in the film, because you don't see it in the book at all, but my favourite part is when Harry realizes the monster that he's created with Dorian, because he's always pushing Dorian to live to his fullest. It was always Harry's philosophy: you've got to live life, and that you cheat on women and you sleep around, you go to brothels, you do the opium and everything like that, you live your life to the fullest. And then when Dorian comes back after traveling Europe, he falls for Harry's daughter, and the irony, I love it. Like, honestly, I love it, and I love watching it. And I love seeing, like, Harry's realization that the daughter that he's had is falling for this monster that he created. And because he knows what Dorian is capable of, because he pushed Dorian to it. So I enjoy this film for what it is. It is what it is. Like, it's not a fantastic film. It's never going to be a fantastic film. But I do enjoy it, and it is a guilty pleasure of mine. So it gets a 6 out of 10 for me. It's not brilliance. It's not, but it's okay. And I wouldn't, I mean, you can watch it if you like, but it's not everyone's cup of tea, and that's fine. Now, the book was very interesting at points. But I was also very annoyed quite a lot with the character of Harry. And I think it's because of how he discussed life and passions and women. But it is a book of its time, so it does make a bit of sense. So it's aged okay-ish. It's good, and I do enjoy reading it, but I think obviously the views that Oscar Wilde wrote about Harry having, it just feels very stilted sometimes, and I kind of sat there being, you know, annoyed, and knowing that this book was written in the 1800s, but still being like, no, that's not okay. Like, I can't believe they said that. So that did kind of take me out of the story a couple of times, but it's absolutely fine. Again, the symbolism of Basil as the angel and Harry as the devil, and how they fought over the man's soul, is done brilliantly. It's written quite well. You see these interactions as well. And then when Dorian, spoiler alert, when Dorian kills Basil, it's almost like he's extinguished everything good in his life and he's finally going over to the dark side. And it's just, you know, and as he slowly descends to a part where many people don't even know who he is, because he's just gone that out of control that even Harry doesn't recognise him anymore. I mean, I would have liked a bit more of his redemption arc in the book. We do get the beginnings of redemption arc in the film, and then he destroys the paintings. You know, we don't get any of that in the book, and I get why the film added it. I would have liked to see a little bit of a redemption arc, because you only see a brief, tiny bit in the book. And it also felt a bit flat with James, who's Sybil's brother. That felt a bit flat in the book as well. Like, it was just the kind of, again, we'll discuss that when we discuss the plot, but it's overall, it is a good story, and the book gets a 6 out of 10 from me. I will probably read it again, and it is such a beautiful cover. Like, I do love the cloth bound classics from Penguin. But yeah, I just felt some points didn't age as well as I would have hoped. So let's start with the plot then. So the plot starts with Basil and Harry. So the book starts with Basil and Harry discussing the amazing portrait of Dorian that is already completed and that Basil has already done. And Harry at this point doesn't know who Dorian is. The film starts with us seeing Dorian kill someone and dispose of the body. We don't know who at this point, but then it goes back to when he first comes back to his family home in London because his grandfather has died. Now in the book, Basil tells of how he became obsessed with having to paint Dorian and how he becomes a better painter because of Dorian. So he becomes friends with Dorian and basically paints him and everything. But Basil also begs Harry to leave Dorian alone because he knows that Harry will have a negative influence on Dorian, and he knows that Dorian is a nice, kind soul. Now in the film, we see that Basil is Dorian's first friend as he comes back and starts to paint his portrait. In the book, Harry first meets Dorian as he arrives at Basil's house. So Harry meets Dorian in a more secluded setting, first of all, in the book. In the film, however, Basil takes Dorian to a party that is hosted by Harry, and that's how they first meet. But in both, Harry is present when the portrait is finished and completed its entirety. Now in both, Harry has very strong views about how you need to live your life, giving in to all temptations. You know, women are not to be loved, you're supposed to have a mistress and all of that. Don't get any ideas. You will be ended if you try to cheat on your significant others. But this kind of strikes a chord with Dorian, who starts believing that maybe he does need to live his life and maybe he doesn't want to age. So in both, they're having a conversation about the fleeting youth and selling your soul to stay young. And as they do, Dorian looks at his completed portrait and honestly does say, oh, I would happily sell my soul. I'd happily have the portrait age and me stay young forever. So that is signified. It's not really signified in the book. Like, you don't get a big signification. It's just said and then it moves on. In the film, you get like a little bit of like lighting and everything like that, and a mood setting, as it were. And then you realise that that's what's happened. So in both, the fight for Dorian's soul has now begun. So Harry appears to be able to sway it better in both the book and the film. Now in the book, Harry finds out about Dorian's heritage and where he comes from and all of that. In the film, he already knows because everyone runs in the same circles. We do get in the film pretty quickly Harry taking Dorian to a brothel, where Dorian sees and falls for a girl called Sybil, who he then finds working in the theatre. In fact, he goes back the next night, finds her in the theatre, and comes in and they fall in love with each other. In the book, we just hear that he's fallen in love with Sybil. We don't see the build up to it. But in both, we do get a lot about Harry's views and how you must live for the moment and give in to your passions and not follow everyone else, etc., etc., etc. Which we don't see him stick to as long as you think he does. Like, he learns, he settles himself down pretty quickly because he realises that you can't do all that. And it's ludicrous that you think you could. So when Dorian tells Harry about Sybil, he's very let down about the derision that Harry deals with it. And he sort of snorts and being like, well, you can have her as a mistress, but don't have her as a wife, you know. And he seems to almost laugh at the idea. And as we know, Dorian is very puppy-like when he's looking for affection. And when he's looking for gratification, that his decisions are the right ones. So when it comes to Harry and seeking affection, he wants to have the positive, the pat on the back, you know, the well done, the thumbs up. So when he doesn't get that, he gets very sort of despondent for a bit. But in both, Dorian and Sybil still get engaged. Now in the book, Sybil has a mum who disagrees, as well as Dorian's society people. Like, she doesn't agree with that. She doesn't, sorry, in the book, I do apologise, let me phrase that better. So in the book, Sybil's mum, who is never in the film, disagrees with the engagement, as does the society people that Dorian hangs out with. In the film, it's just the society people that he hangs out with. So in the book, Basil and Harry accompany Dorian to see Sybil act. However, in the book, the night that they go to see Sybil act, she is subpar, and she does it on purpose, but this leads Dorian to end the engagement because he's not happy with her, and he fell in love with her because she was a great actress, and now she's nothing, and he was embarrassed in front of his friends. In the film, Harry delays Dorian at a brothel again, so that he misses the performance. This causes Dorian to fall out with Sybil, and he calls off the engagement. So in both, the engagement's gone. They're no longer engaged. So when Dorian gets home from dumping Sybil, he notices a small difference to his painting where it looks a little bit crueler, but he doesn't really think anything of it. But it's sort of the beginning of an idea that's planted in his head, that the portrait would grow and change and he would remain youthful and beautiful, but he doesn't quite get there yet. He gets there in a bit. So in the book, he sees this as a way to make sure... So in the book, he's slowly like staring at the portrait and realises at this point that, you know, he can. It takes him a little while to get there, as I said, but he gets there and he realises that he needs to make amends to Sybil and try to be good at first. In the film, he sees this as he can do absolutely anything he wants straight away. So in both, however, Sybil has killed herself because of the failed engagement. Harry tells him in the book, but Sybil's brother tells him and tries to kill him in the film. So Harry is the comforting shoulder in both and basically gets Dorian to almost pretty much shed all blame from Sybil dying, and put Sybil behind him completely. So it's almost like it never happened. Basil tries to comfort Dorian and is aghast to find him so cavalier about the death of Sybil, and is sort of seeing this as the beginning of the end of Dorian. In both, Basil talks of exhibiting the portrait, which of course Dorian cannot allow because the portrait, now we're there in both, is aging and is not looking well and maggots coming out of the eyes and everything. So in both, Dorian kind of fends him off for a bit at first. However, this pushes Dorian to place the portrait away from prying eyes behind a locked door of a disused part of the house. So now with the portrait out of the way, Dorian starts to live out all of his passions and desires, and none of them are good. I put here not all of them are good, but I've just realised that none of them are good. Because his passions and desires are not just confined to England either, but all over the globe. So this is pretty much straight away in the book. He goes around and travels and comes back. In the film, he goes away to Europe after some time, and then comes back and falls in love with Harry's daughter and so on and so forth. But in both, Dorian finally shows Basil what has become of the portrait and explains the situation. In the book, it's because Basil has come as a friend and asked if the rumours about the vile things that Dorian is doing is true. In the film, it's because he's insisting he would like the portrait because he sees how Dorian is changing, and he wants the portrait to display. However, in both, this kind of, when Basil sees the portrait, he is aghast. He is like upset and angry and doesn't react well. This causes Dorian to kill him and dispose of the body and acts like he's gone off to Paris. So this is the person that we saw Dorian murder at the beginning of the film. Again, we don't get this little like flash forward, as it were, in the book. But in the book, Dorian enlists the help of a previous friend of his, Alan, who he's blackmailing to help get rid of the body. In the film, he gets rid of the body all by himself, pretty much. And then this causes him to go off on adventures and come back. And when he comes back, Harry has a fully grown-up daughter. And as I said before, in the book, his adventures are scattered throughout his entire time there. So in both, Sybil's brother catches up with Dorian and almost kills him. However, Dorian convinces him that he's too young to be the man that was engaged to Sybil and let her down. So in the film, this and the dalliances start with Emily. Sorry, I do apologise. So pretty soon after that, James realises that he is the same man, because of just a little thing that happened. So anyway, in the film, this and the dalliance that he started with Emily, who's Harry's daughter, has convinced him that he needs to change his ways and try to become a better person. In the book, James is shot by accident on a shoot that Dorian is part of, or a hunt that Dorian is part of. In the film, James dies because he chases Dorian through London and is hit by a train. But in the book, it's because of that death that Dorian tries to change who he is and tries to be a little bit better. In the film, Harry is starting to figure out Dorian and what his secret is. And in the book, Harry is still a firm friend of Dorian, but is beginning to suspect something in the background. So in the film, Harry, while Dorian is at a party, goes to his house and try and destroy the portrait. However, Dorian finds him there and destroys it himself, allowing Emily and Harry to escape the house. So the film ends with Harry having Dorian's portrait, which is returned back to its normal, youthful beauty. The book ends with Dorian dying, which reverts the portrait back to the beauty that it was. So the book and the film, though very similar in its barest bones of the story, had its own narrative getting to the points. You had more of a redemption arc in the film than you did in the book. The film spanned more years than the book did. And there was a couple of, the debauchery was more shown on the film than it was written in the book. And that I appreciate. I didn't want to read about all the debauchery because I'm not that kind of girl. So the film took the bigger plot points and made their own changes to make it fit to cinema, basically. So the plot gets a 4 out of 10 for me, because although the bare bones of the story is the same, the nuances between it isn't exactly the same. This is my own opinion. Of course, if you agree or disagree with anything that I say, please leave it below in the comments. If there's anything at all that you'd like me to do for a book to film adaptation, again, please leave it below in the comments, or join my Consented Narrative group on Facebook, or follow me on Instagram, and we can work from there. But thank you so much for your continued support, and remember to always keep it contento.